Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lotus Life podcast. My name is Kim Fisher, and I'm your host. Thank you for being here. In this week's podcast, we're diving into a hot topic, something that I hope will ruffle your feathers a little bit, and it will probably, just a warning, trigger some of you who have been practicing yoga for quite some time. This topic deals with two things. I'm going to use the example of the ego that is so often talked about and avoided, or seen as something that we need to dismiss or quiet. I'm going to use that framework as an entry point into this concept of likes and dislikes, preferences, etc., and how that can really damage our relationship to self and body. I hope this sounds interesting. It's a topic that comes up a lot with a couple of my yogi friends, but also just non-yogi people who want to talk to you about yoga. Do you know what I mean when I say that? I'm saying it with so much love, but people who don't necessarily practice the yoga itself, but practice the philosophy, the concept of yoga, they love to talk about ego and how it's a really bad thing all the time. Before we dive into that, I want to give you a personal story from my life. I started practicing yoga back in 2001. And I worked with one teacher who was my guru. She was my guru for probably up until 2010, 2011. And that was a really difficult relationship for many reasons. And I will absolutely, gosh, why haven't I done a podcast on this yet? I really need to dive into that relationship and how there was a misuse of power, I think, in a lot of ways. And because I had a close relationship to her, I absorbed everything she said. I wanted to be her. I wanted to imitate her. Because she was the only thing I knew. She was the only way into yoga at that time, and the only model I had for how yoga should be and how you should be when you practice yoga. And something that her teacher taught her was that the ego is bad. The ego is something that should be demolished and you should renounce, and it's not healthy. So the replacement of ego is compassion. It is, according to this model, if you don't have ego, what do you have then? And you have selflessness, you have love, and you identify with the universe, and you have a more spiritual mindset and body mind connection. But I do not subscribe to that any longer, and I don't think that's true at all. I would never teach that any longer. I'm going to call myself out and say that I used to teach that for a while. The ego's bad. So in a sense, you get what that means, right? Like when we say ego, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's egoism. It's like those assholes who are just all about themselves. And as a result, going around really hurting people on the planet, and grimy people who are just looking to make money and then exploiting everything in the process, or maybe just like really damaging other people because they egotistical assholes. That's what I used to think of, and probably you think of when you hear the word ego. And I think that's what most yogis think of, and that's why they think it's bad. And yeah, okay, that attitude and that type of personality is certainly bad. No, we should not be that way. We should want to be altruistic, and we should want to be loving and compassionate and caring and show up in huge ways for ourselves and our community. Yeah. But you don't need to get rid of your ego to do that. What I think, instead of ego, we just should have said, like, remove that word and just say the categories, the characteristics of what we think is bad. Like, don't be an asshole. All right. Don't put yourself always in front of other people, or rather think that you are better than. See humanity and see spirit, see God in everything. all right, I can do that. You know, don't harm other people with your words and your thoughts and be a complete jerk all the time. And just like be nice to a couple people here and there because they serve your needs and give you what you want. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. But you can work on not being those things and also retain your ego. So here's my take on it. I've had a couple teachers along the way who helped reinforce and I think bring back together the pieces of ego that was blown up by my former teacher. And that really helped me find myself again and find my confidence. I really feel as though, let me continue my story. Yeah, the whole point of talking about my teacher is because that was the introduction of ego is bad, wag the finger, ego is bad, right? As a result of believing that and practicing that for 10 years, I played small. And I played small while my spirit was crying inside. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but I mean that. I had to set aside who I was, truly who I was, in order to be someone else. On one hand, it was my teacher. I wanted to be her. I wanted to emulate her because I loved her and she was the way forward and she brought me so much joy. So why wouldn't I want to be like her? It's such a delight to be around her. So to act like her, to teach like her, to model her was not only a nod of love and respect for her, but also it just brought me joy because I felt closer to her. And plus, I figured that's what the students wanted because they were coming to her classes, etc. But I have forsaken myself. I have neglected to love myself as a result of trying to be someone else. And also, me playing small was so that whatever else came through, whoever else I wanted to model, or whatever else seemed better than myself, that's what I elevated. That's what I put on a pedestal. And then I kept getting further and further down the line. I kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So then when there came moments for me to really show up later in life, I didn't trust myself. I had developed, or rather dismantled, all relationship with my true self. Luckily around 2011, right around when I stopped seeing her, my former teacher, and started opening up my eyes to other ways of practicing yoga, I started to align with the teachers who helped me put back together this idea and concept of yoga and ego. David Swenson said to me once, hey, listen, ego is what you need to get out of bed in the morning. It's what helps you decide if you want oatmeal or scrambled eggs. And it's what helps you decide if you should, pay your bills on time or not. And I think that really helped me understand that ego is not a threat. And it's more so this helpful like self and personality and subjective I that helps me interact with my world. And then I practiced for a month with his brother, Doug Swenson, who playfully helped me see the flaws in all the other yoga teachers that were really famous. And he pointed out the humanity in them. And, I think ego and putting people on pedestals goes hands in hand because if I have an unhealthy attachment to someone else's ego, I have an unhealthy attachment to my ego. And it can pull either way. You can have too much or too little. But that's because we don't have a really good idea of the relationship and integration of what ego actually is. We can lean on psychology a lot for this too. I think of Freud, of course, when I hear ego. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't even really remember the difference between the id and the ego and all those things. But we can lean on psychology to say that, hey, ego is that part of us that lives and helps us interface with the world. And it's also the part of us that gets conditioned, and it's a part of us that can get damaged. It's a part of us that can heal. It's who we are. I right now am Kim Fisher, and I know that I'm the same Kim Fisher that I was yesterday. And I know that I'll be the same Kim Fisher tomorrow. Like there's this continual experience of who I am that persists. in time, this temporal experience. It doesn't change. I don't change, albeit, I don't have a brain injury or tumor or something like that, which would then alter my relationship to my subjective self or my ego, which we see in dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. When people have strokes and hemisphere, the right side of the brain, etc., we see a change in personality. We see a change in relationship to others. The ego changes a little bit. So if none of that happens to me by tomorrow morning, I should be the same Kim Fisher that I am now. That's really comforting. But here's where I think yoga is trying to help us with ego. And let me speak slowly because this is a really tough concept here to get out. And I want to say it clearly. When we're practicing yoga, we are trying to get out of our way. We're trying to get out of our own way. And we see all the places that we're blocking ourselves. And that's fear, or that's trauma, or just lack of experience. And then we see those things, and ego comes in and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you touch that thing, if you disrupt that, we're going to change our whole story here. Who you are, what you like and what you dislike is going to change. Oof. That's one thing. Okay, and then if I change, that means my significant other is going to have to change or adapt to that. And are they? Are they going to like the new me? What about my friends and family? If I change, are they going to like the new me? So then we start to freak ourselves out because we know the answer to that. The answer is no. Most people don't like it when other people change because that means they might have to change. So ego freaks you out a little bit and says, I don't want to do that much work. You're comfortable just as you are. Let's just stay. And so then we stay. We never progress. And so I think that's where it's healthy. It's a beautiful relationship with ego to recognize that it's there to keep you safe, that it's there to uphold some boundaries that have, up until certain moments, kept you alive, kept you safe. But now, through yoga, through spiritual practices, we slowly brush up against those boundaries and ask, is it still needed? Does this still serve me? And sometimes the answer is yes, and it stays. And sometimes the answer is no, and then we slowly look to integrate and let go and heal from that wound and grow as a result. And when we say grow in this context of ego, our personality, our subjective self changes, and who we are is different now. That's ego to me. It is our recipe. It's the ingredients that make us up. And it's important to know the ingredients that make you up. On the yoga retreat recently that I led, we talked about boundaries and how boundaries really are the recipe book, the cookbook, on how to bake a delicious you. If I were to bite into you, sounds kind of creepy, I know, but just keep going. Trust me, this goes somewhere. If I were to bite into you and it tastes delicious, why? I want to replicate you. How? How do I do that? What are the ingredients that make you absolutely delightful to be around? That's what I mean symbolically about take a bite into you, is to be around you, to have the essence of you, to experience you in a very delightful way. What are the ingredients that make that up? Ego and self, subjective I, are the things, is the experience that tells you what that is. Now, that lives in the mind. So the body also has a say in what makes us feel good and delightful. It has its own rules and feelings and emotions and desires to move and dance and be in the world that also say, this is the way I like to move to feel delightful and delicious. This is the way I like to chant or use my voice to feel delightful and delicious. All of those things, the body and the mind, make up us, the experience of us. And that's not bad. If you want to call it ego, okay. But I think if we remove that word for a second and the connotation that it's bad, we can start to parse it and look clearly at the distinguishing characteristics that make up an ego. And then we can decide whether or not it's good or bad. Robert Augustus Masters is another person who, he's an author, he is a psychologist. I love his work. He says, and I can't think of the title of the book right now, ego isn't bad, it's what we do with ego that should be important. Having an ego is not bad. It's actually really natural to know who you are, what your gifts are, and what you want out of life, okay? That's really important, actually, when it comes to establishing boundaries in relationships, and boundaries are ways of loving someone better. So it's important to know what turns you on and turns you off and be able to declare those things. But it's what we do with it that really counts. Are you declaring what turns you on and turns you off so that you can step into your community, into your world as an enlightened and actualized being and just light shit up? That sounds pretty damn good to me. I don't know about you. Or are you using it to set up boundaries and walls to push people away, to judge others, to segregate? Those are things that an ego would be used, we could say, badly for. So it's not that you have an ego, it's how you use it. It's not that you have pain in your life, it's how you use it. It's not that you have pleasure, it's how you use it. It's not that you have money, it's how you use it. It's not that you have power, it's how you use it. Get it? So this is the entry point now into the larger topic I wanted. That was pretty deep already, but here's the real meat and potatoes. The tofu and potatoes from my vegetarian friends out there of this podcast. And that is this: everything in life is neutral. We give it a charge of negative or positive. Everything in life is just kind of there. And we assign value to it, whether it's good or bad. This is so important, and it became incredibly important on my own personal journey, because when I played small, I was saying that my true self was bad. And I could only bring my true self out to play, unpack her around certain beings that I felt safe around. Now, because I've done the work, and I'll talk a little bit about what the work in air quotes there means in just a second. But now I no longer talk to myself in terms of good and bad. I have done the work to love all of me. And by the way, it is consistent daily work to show up and practice the skill of self-love and self-compassion, and to reach back into my past and to pull forward the parts of me that are still wounded and need some love, and set them down like a child on my lap and just say, hey, tell me what's wrong. Tell me how I've hurt you in the past, and let's try to make amends here and bring you forward and have your voice be heard now. And as a result, all of me gets to show up all of the time. When we say this is who I am and that isn't who I am, when we say this is good, that is bad, we open up the door to playing, giving selections for our personality. So when these types of, when you're at work, you're one type of person because that's what's allowed. When you're with your significant other, you're a different person because that's what's allowed. I know a lot of people who can't bring their spirituality home. They can't bring their yoga home because their partner isn't yogic, which that's just bullshit to me. So what, they don't unroll a mat, that doesn't matter. Being with them as they are is the practice of yoga right there in union. So you can be with anyone and anything, even if they don't say or claim they practice yoga. But if you're intimate with them in the moment, you are doing yoga with them. We have to just shift our boundaries on what we think yoga is. But when I say that I can be me and all of me in any situation, whether I'm at work, whether I'm right now with you in this podcast or on YouTube, whether I am in a workshop or a retreat in an intimate setting with you, or whether I am with my partner, Brandon, or whether I am with my friends or my family or whatever, that I am bringing all of me to the table, because That is what's required for me to love myself. And it turns out that I love all of me too. I have accepted, I want to be in relationship with all of me. And what happens when I declare that and when I show up into a room or a space with all of me, I no longer play small. Sometimes people don't like that. It's a shock to their nervous system. But in my vision for not playing small, I don't see anyone else playing small because that just doesn't align. You with me on that? Like, if I play big, it's because I've realized that I'm connected to divine spirit. I'm connected to source. I'm connected to God, whatever you want to call that, in the most intimate way. It flows through me. It's in the spaces between my cells. It is the space between this camera and my voice right now. It is in this, between the space of you hearing it in your body. Source and spirit is everywhere, and it's pulsating. It's driving us forward. It's accepting and holding us. Like, come on. If I see that, I am able to heal. I am able to love all of me. Wherever my awareness flows, so does love. And I let it flow everywhere, all over me and inside of me and through my future self, through my past self, and through now. And heal my relationship with the fragmented parts of me that I was told was too loud, too crazy, too wild, too different, weird, like all of those words that were thrown at me like arrows that I took personally because myself was small and I told the ego was bad, right? Because like if you felt pain, that meant you had ego, but if you were selfless, you wouldn't take it personally. Bullshit. Things hurt because things hurt. If someone throws an arrow at you and it's an insult, it should hurt a little because you're a human fucking being. Not because you're a selfless person. Like, it hurts sometimes. It hurts. Yes, we learned not to take things personally, but we also need to know when to call someone out on their shit, when they're just deliberately being an asshole. We need to stand up for ourselves. That's part of the yogic path as well, and holding fire inside of us. And boundaries. Boundaries are a very important part of your growth. You don't want to use yoga to help us bypass what's really going on. That only furthers the trauma cycle. So, settle back into my body and my discussion right now with you. And that is really to say this, that you do the work to love yourself. What you're really doing is no longer playing small. And you don't have to worry about playing small because you see yourself connected to the divine. When you see yourself connected to the divine, instantaneously, you see the rest of the world connected to the divine. It doesn't happen in stages. Like, that just comes to you in that moment. And some of you listening and watching know exactly what I'm talking about. It's impossible to feel separate. You are one. You see separateness as an illusion. You are one with everything around you. It's moving you forward deeper and deeper into a state of love. And what's really wild, and this just came to me, is that you'll still have ego that says I'm separate because my name is Kim and I look like this and my body ends here and you start there. Like, I still know we're separate beings, which is a really beautiful, unique expression of the divine. And so I can do two things in that moment. I can be with you and see you as me, and I see me in you, and I see us both in spirit, and I see spirit in us, and holy shit, that's incredible. But I also recognize that you are a unique manifestation of spirit and soul. And there's no one like you. You're so beautiful. And so it is both your separateness and your ego and your divinity and unity that make you so exquisite. And you do that work, what I just said to you, on yourself as well. You do it through mirror work, repeating that to yourself in the mirror. You do it during your morning ritual, and you bathe yourself in the love of knowing that you are the divine and you are in this unique incarnation of your own experience. And you're charged with the order of awakening and no longer playing small. Then When you're in a room and someone is shook a little bit by your presence, first of all, you should just come to expect that, because playing big is a huge boulder that you just dropped into a pond. Waves will ripple out for lifetimes. When someone is a little bit nervous or shook by your presence, it's because they are playing small. And in that moment, what I want you to do is have compassion. I want you to know and recognize where they're coming from. They're going to feel defensive because they're wounded and they're living that story. That's because someone told them they were too big. Someone told them they were too loud. Someone told them they were too much at some point, and that there's this other way to be, and they followed them instead of honoring their own soul, their own passion, their own experience. And so they're playing small, and so you playing big is a threat to them. But if you come at them with love and compassion and stay rooted in what you know to be true, which is that we are one with the divine, and that is what you see for them, you're carrying the lessons forward. You're holding the torch out for other people so that they can see that they no longer need to play small, that they can play big as well. And they don't need to apologize for playing big. They're showing up in the most humanitarian way possible. The most selfless way possible is to shine, because that is the only way to light up humanity. It is the only way to heal yourself and then to heal others, is if you step up to the plate and own your gifts, own your personality, own your shortcomings, own all of it, and never fragment the fuck again. Stay solid in who you are. Solidarity, all of you, all of your orphan parts, they show up right here. There's one of you. And the cool thing is, as Deborah Adele says, that you'll never walk into a room where all the people that you've been different for are in a room and you suddenly have to decide, who the hell should I be right now? Because I was a different person for them and different person for them. You'll never have that problem. You'll just show up. And the most amazing gift is when you give someone else permission to show up as themselves too. And that's really what being a yoga instructor for me is all about, is giving someone the space and the ability to witness that who they are and what they are right now is enough and really beautiful. That comes from ego, actually. And it comes from how you use ego. And again, let's remove the words and just look at the characteristics. It comes from some boundaries. It comes from knowing what lights you up. It comes from knowing when you were told to play small and you're not going to do that, right? That was a boundary that was set for you and you obeyed it. And now we pull that out by the roots. So boundaries, ego, and divine love are all very connected. There's stages, there's steps to move through. So the next time someone says, ego, or, you get worried that you have too big of an ego, I want you to just remember, how are you using it? That's the question. How are you using it? How are you using your money? How are you using your power? How are you using your sex? How are you using your relationship? How are you using everything? How? Because everything in the world is neutral. We assign it points. We assign it value. You use it wisely. And remember that your highest expression of self is needed right now in the world. It's actually very important that you dive into your pleasure state. It's actually very important that you know who you are and that you own that and you come forward with love. That's not ego. That's not ego. That's just loving awareness. I hope that these words provoked you a little bit. I hope that these words led you into a different area of your mind and thinking, and encourages you to look differently at the relationship we have with ourselves and our personalities and our likes and dislikes, and that with our relationship with others too. Thank you, everyone, so very much for listening and watching, and I will see you next time.